A little boy, very defiantly, stood in front of the new principal and said to him, "Go ahead, give it to me." The principal looked at this boy and asked the question, "How many times have you been here?" The child snared back in a rebellious attitude and said, "Apparently not enough." The principal looked at this strange boy and said, "And you have been punished every time you have been here, right?" And the boy said, "Yeah, I've been punished, if that's what you want to call it." Then the boy threw off his hands and says, "There, give it to me, give it to me." And the principal said to the boy, "And you have never thought of the punishment every time you broke the rules, right?" And the boy said, "Nope. I do whatever I want to do. And nothing you people can do to stop me either." The principal was amazed and surprised and shocked. So he turned over to the teacher that brought the boy and asked the question, "What did he do this time?" And the teacher explained, "Fighting. See, he took little Tommy and shoved his face into the sandbox." And the principal was surprised and turned back to the boy and said, "What did little Tommy do now?" And the boy said, "Nothing. I didn't like the way he was looking at me, and so I shoved him into the sandbox. And I don't like the way you're looking at me either. And if I thought I could get away with it, I would shove you into something." A strange look crossed the principal's face as the principal looked at this rebellious child. As he looked at that child, something began to happen in his heart. And so he quietly said to the boy, "Today, my young student, is the day you're going to learn something about grace." The boy looked up and said, "Grace? Isn't that what you old people say just before you eat? I don't need any of your stinking grace." And the principal said, "Oh no, you do. Yes, you do. You do need grace. You see, grace in its short definition is unmerited favor. You cannot earn it. It is a gift, and it's always freely given. It means that you will not get what you rightly deserve." The boy was a little surprised. And so he looked up to the teacher and looked back to the principal and said, "You're not gonna whip me? So you just gonna let me walk?" The principal looked down and at this unyielding child and said, "Yes, son, yes, I'm going to let you walk." The boy studied the principal, looked at him and said, No punishment at all. Even though I sacked Tommy and shoved his face in the sandbox, and the principal said, oh, there is going to be punishment. You see, what you did was wrong, and there is always consequences for wrong actions. There will be punishment. Grace is not an excuse for doing wrong. And the boy said, I knew it. There, go ahead, give it to me. The principal nodded to the teacher and said, bring me the belt. And the teacher handed the belt to the principal. He folded that belt in two and gave it back to the teacher. Stood up, walked over to the young student, stood right in front of him, and said to him, count the blows. Then he turned around, facing the teacher, and gave the teacher his hands, and said calmly, begin. The teacher lifted that belt, swung it through the air. Crack! The young man jumped 10 feet in the air, shocked, and said, 1. Crack! 2. Crack! 3. The boy couldn't take it anymore. Said, no, please, stop, please. Crack! Please stop, crack! Please don't do, it's enough now, stop, crack! Please don't do it, I did it, it's me who did it, crack! Please stop, crack! And at every crack, the boy would cringe. And the teacher continued. And the boy continued counting. Continued pleading, stop, please, stop, don't do it, please, stop. 39 strokes. And then it was over. The principal stood there, sweating, as the sweat began to track down his face. He looked at his hands. With signs of the belt. Solemn. He turned around to the boy, knelt down on his knees, and looked at him in the eye, and then reached over and hugged the boy, and allowed that young boy to cry over his shoulders. That's grace. That's grace. That's what God the Son did for you on the cross. He did it to restrain all of us from being completely completely wicked and ungovernable. That's what grace is. Grace is that what makes us, even though we are fallen, to be able to live, to have a resemblance of order. That's what grace is. It's dynamic. It doesn't just save. It regenerates. It transforms. It revitalizes. It's what God did on the cross, providing forgiveness and reconciliation for you and me. That's what grace is. God absorbed in his own body the punishment due you and me. It is sufficient. Christ paid the full price. I will tell you right now, if you are facing trials and afflictions in your life, God's grace is sufficient. God is attentive to your needs. He's even attentive to your wants and to your complaints. God heard the complaints of Israel. He responded by providing for them. In my study of this chapter, as I heard Nehemiah begin to recite the history of Israel, I came to the conclusion that God is near me. He is listening to me when I'm hungry. He's listening to me when I'm anxious, dislocated from my homeland. God is near me. He is familiar. He is familiar with my needs as I move across this unfamiliar territory. God is near me. He knows me. Even when I didn't know my future. Church, God is for you. So let's be thankful. Let's try to receive his offer of salvation. You see, we cannot earn it. We don't have the qualification. We can't have the merits necessary. We don't have the experience. We don't even have the expertise. Salvation is by grace.